We offshored all our production to these, a bunch of different places, but I would say like China, Korea, and Japan. We funded the development of all their production. We funded the development of all of their infrastructure for 30 years. 30 years is like 1.5 generations. That's enough for people to take an enormous amount of tribal knowledge and then train the next generation. And so we did all of that, and now China, for the past probably 5, 10, 15 years, has been having sort of like their 1776 moment. I started to get the feeling that the West was forgetting how to build great things, and I wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. So set out to go build Dirac.
Dirac, like what do you guys do? What do you guys build? What do you solve?
Absolutely. Well, I'll give you the high-level background of myself and how the company kind of got started, and then dive into what is Dirac, why does it matter, what are we doing here, why are we in the Empire State Building, why does that matter? So my name is Phil, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dirac. I know you guys know this, but for the broader audience who probably does not. My background's originally in electrical engineering and robotics. I spent a little bit of time over at Northrop Grumman. Got TS clearance, worked on some pretty cool radar stuff over there. When they ran out of electrical engineering work to give me, they gave me some mechanical engineering work to do. And when they ran out of mechie work to give me, they gave me some technician work. So, did a little bit of assembly, a little bit of tests, just got to see how absurdly archaic all of the infrastructure was on the manufacturing side of things. To me, seemed like a pretty advanced company on the engineering side of things. And I guess I wanted to do something about it. I started to get the feeling that the West was forgetting how to build great things, and I wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. So I got my best friend and co-founder, Peter, and we set out to go build Dirac. Funny enough, we are a software company, but this is actually not the very first version of Dirac. We initially set out to go build what we were calling the aerospace factory of the future. We were trying to do robotic assembly for aerospace systems at scale, and basically bring automation to really manual, archaic assembly processes in aerospace. And so spent 6 months, slept on a lot of floors, on a lot of couches, went to 90 aerospace manufacturers over the course of those 6 months, and basically went to them and said, hey, trust us, outsource your assembly work to us, we're going to build this really cool factory, come on, let's work together. And these folks kept saying, two things mainly. Factory seems like a cool idea, but who the hell are you? What are you talking about? What factory? But also, the factory seems like a cool concept, but that software you have under the hood that's figuring out the assembly planning automatically just from the CAD file, that would actually be game-changing for our guys on the shop floor today. Can we just have the software? And for, 6 months, I was super duper stubborn. I was like, no, SaaS is lame. I'm a hardware guy. We're building a hardware company. We're building a factory. It's going to be sick. And, after hearing the same thing over and over again for 6 months, I kind of realized, okay, might be a better place to start if we just, start with the software. So we took that assembly simulation planning software, tore it out of the robotic assembly infrastructure, and built a platform around it. And that is actually what is BuildOS today. So BuildOS is what we like to call the first automated work instruction platform. You guys know what work instructions are, by any chance?
Yes, but you just talk about it.
Yeah. So just to give you guys a little bit of the history of the work instruction, why this is a thing that nobody knows about, nobody cares about, but matters critically. In the early 70s, or basically up until the early 70s, engineers and manufacturers were connected by one thing, and that was the blueprint, right? Classic cyanotype blueprint that everybody knows and loves and imagines in their head when they say blueprint. And then in the late 70s, early 80s, CAD software emerged. You guys know what CAD software is? Yeah, so that 3D modeling software. CAD software emerged and became ubiquitous. And basically all the mechanical engineers who were living on the shop floor, very well integrated into production. They actually knew how these things fit together in the real world. They all went from being generally blue collar or white collar, started, they basically were relegated to the back office, started living in front of 2D screens in air-conditioned, buildings 5,000 miles away from where the thing they were designing was actually built. And unfortunately, since then, mechanical design has been completely divorced from reality. You have mechanical engineers who are frequently now designing systems that are very often not manufacturable, and mechanical engineers coming out of school never actually having been to a shop floor before. And so when all that happened, when CAD software emerged, it basically took the blueprint and fractured it into what I like to say is two parts. CAD software on the design side and work instructions on the build side. Now, CAD software got all the upgrades for 50 years. It's now super cool, very fancy, despite everybody on the internet saying, like, oh, Parasolid is like this CAD kernel that's like 20 plus years old. It's actually really, really advanced software. And work instructions, which is this like blue collar equivalent, this counterpart, never got any upgrades. And so you guys actually probably know like the concept of work instructions very well. If you've ever built IKEA furniture, that little paper instruction book that tells you how to build the thing, imagine that before planes, cars, engines, missiles, etc. That is basically a work instruction. It is a sort of a guided document for telling an operator or technician on the shop floor, how do I actually make this thing?
That somebody designed 2,000 miles away.
Exactly, exactly. And so the person whose job it is to make that work instruction is this person called a manufacturing engineer. They're basically like the blue-collar equivalent to the white-collar mechanical engineer. Mechanical engineer, the process of like this, from design to like making a thing in the real world, the process typically looks like a mechanical engineer like CADing it up, being like, cool, this is like a neat platonic ideal of like what this thing should look and feel like. Like, let me make the CAD file, job's done. They email it to like some dude at the factory, and that some dude is the manufacturing engineer. The manufacturing engineer gets that CAD file, they'll pull it apart, they'll figure out like, how do I actually like make this thing a real thing? And that process takes a ridiculous amount of time. So they'll take that CAD file, pull it apart, figure out the assembly ordering, take millions of screenshots, hundreds of screenshots, throw all those screenshots into a several hundred-page PowerPoint or Word doc over the course of weeks or months. And that is like the modern work instruction. That's like what 99.9% of manufacturing engineers do for their work instructions. If they're lucky enough to make work instructions, sometimes these are like, it's sort of like how a software engineer like doesn't feel like making documentation, except like about 10 times more critical, because if you're basically only relying on tribal knowledge, you don't have any standardized processes or any documentation about how you actually make your thing in a factory. If you have the average age of the American manufacturer is 55. And so, there are many facilities that are solely reliant on tribal knowledge. They don't even have work instructions. And so they're looking at a very, very rough time over the next 5-10 years when all the guys who like know how to put their products together end up retiring. So that is, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That is the high level about like why this matters. Like the West is going to forget how to build great things if we do not write that shit down.
Yes.
And our whole perspective is we're taking this process that sucks a lot. Like nobody likes making these like ridiculous, work instructions that are extremely painful to make, really time consuming, really boring. We basically, rather than taking weeks or months to make them, we take your CAD file as an input. We basically run an assembly physics simulation to pull it apart, figure out what order to do the assembly in automatically, and then automatically generate 80 to 90% of your assembly work instruction. We very much call it an 80-20 tool because it's like a very difficult problem to like fully automate generally. And also CAD files are the platonic ideal of a system. They don't have all of that manufacturability information and tribal knowledge that's critical to actually like knowing the nooks and crannies about how you actually put something together. And so that 10 or 20% that we're not automating, that's like the rule of thumb, tribal knowledge type of stuff that you don't get from a CAD file, that we basically allow a manufacturing engineer to automatically associate with specific components over time. So that's like stuff like, grease this or Loctite that or, torque this bolt to the spec. It's that like, more fine-tuned, more tribal knowledge, more stuff that you would learn on the job, but might like appear on like a Post-it note on the side of like an assembly workstation. So yeah, that's kind of what we're cooking here. I can dive way deeper into like the philosophy of all of it, and like why it's very important for a manufacturing facility to operate like a well-oiled machine as opposed to like an engineering company, which is supposed to be very innovative and whatnot. But I'll sort of like leave that there.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did you stumble into this problem? Was it something you ran into at Northrop?
So a little bit, yeah. So I saw it at Northrop a bit, but when we were doing the factory concept originally, when I was just talking to all these folks, they kept saying like I would show a manufacturing engineer or like a VP of production like, hey, outsource your assembly work to us. Like here's like a simulation of like what this robotic assembly system is going to do, but it didn't have any arms. It was just like bolt going into hole, washer, nut, and they were like, whoa, this would be really cool as work instructions. And I was like, yeah, like whatever, but like who cares about work instructions? But turns out everybody who actually builds things cares about work instructions. And it's one of those things that like mechanical engineer, like this is why it's like it's very funny talking to at least for like, you know, I've been at this for like maybe a year and a half, like not too much longer than that as like a company. But early days, I would talk to folks, I would like pitch investors on like the company, and they were like, oh, let me tap into my network of really smart mechanical engineers who know everything. But the problem with mechanical engineers is they don't know what work instructions are. They've never heard of them.
They work in CAD.
They work in CAD.
Right.
And so like most of the people in like the tech, like software world only really talk to people on the design side. And that's why it's like all this, there's a lot of like hype around like generative CAD and like text to CAD. And like I generally think it's like, there's like, I think text to CAD is like a very, I don't mean to like totally go in like a rabbit hole, but I think text to CAD is like it is neat. Like it's neat. There's, like if you were to like try to describe in words, geometry is a much denser encoding of like information than like, you know, geometry is like a much denser encoding of information than like words. Like if I were to like try to describe like the geometry of like, you know, this microphone or like hell, like this Diet Dr. Pepper can, not sponsored, but I wish, that'd be great.
There you go.
Love Diet Dr. Pepper. If I were to try to like describe the geometry of that, it would take me like paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs, which is like not a great way to communicate geometry. It's like text is a good way to, you know, basically query an LLM or whatever to give me like information that's also generally like text-based. But like geometry is you have to be very, very specific down to literally like the point or the line. And the densest encoding of that information is literally like a BREP, which is like text readable. It is like references of like geometric primitives of like lines and circles and, you know, points and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just like I think it's generally a little silly for like a production use case. Although like, I think the text to CAD, have you guys like seen any of this stuff?
Yeah.
Just shrink cuts here and there.
Well, I've seen you post about this.
You've seen my post about it. As the authoritative thought leader on, you know, being a text to CAD hater.
Yes,
That's me. But I don't know. My perspective on like building new technology in general is like, I think building new stuff is cool. I think we should build everything. I have like no qualms. I don't think anybody should not be building something. But the production value of things is like sort of different than that, in my opinion. Like, I think you should totally build text to CAD. Like, I think you should totally build neat little like widgets. But like, I don't think that's like I don't really see it being like, it's not accurate enough to really do the full job for people, and it is really tough to be useful for like a production use case. But I think if text to CAD evolves as like an actual market, I think it'll be for like getting like a hobbyist, like who CAD is like too prohibitive because it's like crazy, you know, complicated software. I think it's like a really interesting like on-road to, you know, like somebody in college who
It's like the GarageBand on your Mac.
Yes, yes, exactly. Text to CAD is GarageBand on your Mac.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like a cool little thing for you to like tinker with. If like, it's sort of like the flip side to the 3D printer stuff, where like, you know, 10 years of 3D printer mania, and like people were like, 3D printers are they're gonna democratize, you know, access to like everything. You're just gonna be able to print everything, and like you won't have to go to the store. You'll just print yourself like a thing. This is like the text to CAD stuff is like the flip side to that coin, where like now before like you have to have like a CAD. And I'm not saying like text to CAD is like here or anything, but conceptually, before like the text to CAD concept was a thing, you would have to go to like you would have to like get CAD software. You have to like CAD something up. You would go online. You like download like an STL file of like some cool, you know, phone holder or something, right? Like this is like a very common like use case. And then you would like get a 3D printer, you would print your thing, then you'd be like, cool, I made like a couple of knickknacks, like neat, done. Unless you were like a hobbyist. Or unless you were specifically using it in like a production environment for a specific part with a specific use case. But like the flip side being text to CAD, like I can go, I don't know if you've seen like the Atom CAD stuff.
Oh, I don't think so.
Kind of like this like YC company. Like, at first I was like, this is like kind of silly. But then I was like, okay, maybe like the use case itself of like, some college kid who like, is like a literature major. It's like, I want like a sunflower pendant.
Sure.
Like, all right, cool. Like
And
sunflower. And it's like, all right, cool. Yeah, there's like a little CAD file like a sunflower, and you can just print it with your 3D printer. That I think is kind of interesting. I don't know like how big the market is, because like the unfortunate reality that a lot of companies learned is like most people want things for free. Like if you're doing like B2C stuff, people want things for free. And the only reason like companies like Facebook or any companies that like have a free product are able to be extremely big companies and make a lot of money is because if something is free, like you are the product.
Sure.
And so like Facebook, advertises and like sells data and stuff like that. That's why Facebook is free. But like I don't know what the equivalent is for like a free like text to CAD because
Talk to us about the difference between like traditional tech startups versus manufacturing, because there's a lot of hype right now. Like people are wanting to go into that space. What is the trajectory there? What's the differences that you see?
That's a good question. So for the past, I've got like a whole spiel on this, I guess.
Great. We're the Spiel podcast.
It's true. So historically, like Silicon Valley, when it sort of became a thing, was this sort of like World War II oriented, like war machine production, like region. Like we innovated a ton in Silicon Valley. This was like where the DoD was like, hey, you guys should like start like ripping cool new technologies. And then like between like World War II and 1991, like the whole Cold War basically pushed us to innovate on a ton of new technologies. It was generally pretty neat when we, as like a catalyst for like developing novel technologies. After like 1991 and the Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet Union collapsed, we basically, as like the United States, declared like global victory. We were like, global hegemony, the West has won, we're post-history, life is great, democracy has prevailed, liberty has won. And we basically, said we slayed the Great Red Dragon, it's over, guys, we won. And basically from like 1991 to like anything after that, I would say like up until like maybe today, like 2024 or something, 2025, we fell into this like malaise and gluttony of like, hey, post 1991, we're going to go be like this global economic empire. We're going to do like this, our own form of like global colonialism, which is like, let's outsource our production to China and South Korea and Japan. Like, let's make them our like vassal states and like our own new form of colonialism, which is just like, labor's cheap there. Let me do like some labor arbitrage. And this is like the like 90s era like financialization mentality. And, offshoring was happening like it started happening really in the 70s and 80s, but like really full bore in the 90s. It was like all of like NAFTA. We were like, yeah, totally like global American empire, which like based, but also like not intelligently done.
Right.
Like you can't really do like global American empire in like this weird proxy war kind of thing. We use like the dollar instead of like bullets for like our global sphere of influence. And
it was very cheeky, trying to like be like, we're not an empire, but like,
yes,
we're just like abstract. Like
my perspective on it is like pick one.
Right. Exactly.
Pick one. America's either an empire or it's a nation.
Right. I
don't like proxy stuff. I think it's like very coy and no one ends up happy and like it's very unserious. Just pick one. And so I'll get to the point of like why this relates to tech versus hardware. Anyway, it's all related. And so Silicon Valley and like the broader like the new tech ecosystem that like we're familiar with like venture capital and whatnot was sort of born out of this financialization in the 90s. Like venture capital was a thing before this, but it became more like generally mainstream, like 90s, 2000s, like the dot-com era. And so people thought like, well, all of our production is like over there. I don't need to innovate on hardware. Like the Chinese are doing that. They're making our little widgets for free. And it's like, great. And so what ended up happening over those, let's call it 30 years, let's say 1991 to 2021, right? 30 years. What ended up basically happening was we had this, we basically offshored all of our production. We had a bunch of things happening at the same time. We had, if you look at the numbers of electrical engineering degrees versus computer science degrees, there's like I would say roughly 60 to 70% of programs in universities for electrical engineering and computer science are one program. There's an EECS program, EECS. Computer science used to be like a subdiscipline of electrical engineering, which like makes sense because you sort of like start like very low level like programming, you sort of like work your way up. And so from like 2003 to 2023, you see this like number of like ton of electrical engineering grads, like very few computer science degrees, and over time it just goes like this. And so like I'm an electrical engineer by background, so like I've seen this. When I graduated, I graduated in 2022, so young fellow over here. But like in my graduating class, there were 20 electrical engineers and there were 300 computer science degrees, and that is like the unfortunate like that is the indicator of like how much more people are like living in this like software digital first like reality where like these computer science majors don't work with their hands. They've never worked in a shop. They've never been to a factory. They don't think about the day-to-day of how do I like, make this thing. And so we decided post-1991 that we were going to be a tertiary economy, we were going to be a service economy, and like that's what mattered. And so all of the new innovations that kind of came after that were entirely oriented around like the self, the person, services, service economy, Uber, Snapchat, like how do I focus on the self? How do I focus on connecting with other people? How do I get my food faster? How do I go from one place to another faster? Instead of how do I make things faster? It's like this very, you ever hear that like statement? It's like sometimes people focus on things, other types of people focus on people. And it's like this post, 1991 economic like standing of we should focus on people, we should focus on people. And we see that socially. We also saw that economically. Like all of our new tech innovations were focused on people as opposed to things. And so that is like the tech versus old, the new manufacturing tech versus like the older like, fintech, B2B SaaS like stuff, tech. And so what we're seeing now is like, when you look at economy, you think about it from primary, secondary, tertiary economies. You also think about it from the perspective of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so your primary economy, like your mining, and then like your production after that, and then your all the other things coming after that, your tertiary economy, your support systems, they look a lot like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so if you as an economy don't have stability in the base level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, shit just starts collapsing. And so people, I think, are becoming more acutely aware of that. People more, becoming acutely aware of like if we're not like a totally interconnected like global ecosystem, like the Houthis could just like, I don't know, Houthi, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Houthi. The Houthis, the Houthi guys.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. They can cut off trade, right? Like this is, you can just have like a band of like crazy rebels. Like you ever see like the Star Wars guys with the that's like how I imagine the Houthis.
The
like,
Tusken Raiders.
Yeah, Tusken Raiders. That's like I don't know what a Houthi looks like, but like I imagine them as like a Tusken Raider. Just saying like you like blocking the ships.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And so like you can just block trade. The world is not like this crazy safe place where everything's all cuddles and rainbows. Like the default state of humanity is like suffering and death. And like, we have to actively work to protect and build and make sure that we have a stable base in order to make sure that our value system is preserved. Because like the default state is no value system. So it takes work. Like the universe naturally descends into entropy if you do not actively work to create order. Like creating order takes energy and it takes effort. And, people are realizing that, or more and more interesting, smart people are realizing that like, yeah, you kind of have to like care about how you manufacture. You kind of have to care about production. You kind of have to care about the people who make sure that shit happens. Like, anyway, that is why, the reason that this ties back to the geopolitical stuff I was talking about earlier about like this like economic colonialism, sort of like this production colonialism, is basically such that like, we offshored all our production to these like, a bunch of different places, but I would say like China, Korea, and Japan. we became best pals with South Korea and Japan. We're like, even though we like fought with Japan pretty heavily, we're like best pals. China, on the other hand, like huge underdog mentality. They're like, no, like we're not just going to be a vassal state. We're going to take all the resources. We funded all of their we funded the development of all their production. We funded the development of all of their infrastructure for 30 years. 30 years is like 1.5 generations. That's enough for people to take an enormous amount of tribal knowledge and then train the next generation. And so we did all of that, and now China, for the past like probably 5, 10, 15 years, has been having sort of like their 1776 moment, where they're starting to rebel from the mother colony. If we were smart, we would start to like look at 1776. We would look at like what did the British do wrong, and avoid becoming the British versus China having this like American mentality of being the rebel. If we were smart, we would learn from that. But we're not actively. We're sort of at least for the past 5 years, 6 to 8 years, we've been like sleepwalking through it. Yeah. So people are starting to wake up to it. They're like, yeah, it's time to like Top Gun it back into action. Like we're back. We actually care again. It's the ethereal. We were seeing that meme about like the 4 cycles of like, Americans are like, or Americans are like, oh man, it's all lost. We don't have any more of this resource. American, wanders through the desert, finds abundant amount of resource. We're back. Yeah, it's like that, but like willpower.
What's your sense of the feasibility of American reindustrialization? Like, obviously, that's a big topic now. But doomers who are like, you have no idea. We can never get back the tribal knowledge. It'll never happen in our lifetimes. Versus it's happening now.
Not if I can help it. We're as in like the tribal knowledge portion of it. I totally think it's feasible. I think it's a question of will, and I think it's a question of capital. Mostly will. I think, generally speaking, total 100% reshoring of production to the United States within the U.S. borders is going to take a little bit longer. But I think the general nearshoring tactic of like, how do we take a factory that we had in China and then move it to like Mexico or move it to Canada like first before we then transition it into the U.S. is like an easier way to do it. It's like a more like the notion of like we have to move a million factories into the U.S. by next week is like I think very optimistic and hopeful, but it's like physically like not super possible. But we should be pushing towards that. Like the reality is a lot of these factories, I think tariffs are incredibly good for this. Like it forces American headquartered companies to bring back their production to the U.S. You actually see a lot of, there is a lot of movement on this already. Even companies that are not based in the U.S., companies that have massive markets where their customers are in the U.S., they need to bring those facilities into the U.S. because if they're going to sell in the U.S., they don't want to import across U.S. borders, and so they have to have it like manufactured domestically. It's just a question of like proximity to your customer base. And so like you look at a company like Siemens. Siemens is like actively Siemens, like companies like Stellantis. These companies are actively reinvesting in American production. They're moving a lot of like their European and like other like Asian production to the U.S. Like recently, like their CEOs are like going on the air talking about this. I think it's great. I would love for us to move faster. I would love for more people to do it. I think it's totally possible, and I think it's going to happen. I think people are going to use Mexico and Canada as like a stopping point before they like go full bore. It's easier for them to do that, and I think that is okay.
So that's a good segue to the question I was going to ask earlier, which is why don't you talk a little bit about the sort of the new founder class? There's just like we all hung out last year, industrialized at a bar with some cool people. It was just like the adventure class. These are guys who are not going into just BB SaaS and creating people-focused software, abstracted, financialized systems. There's just guys who are betting on the real world. The real world is not off limits anymore. Guys like Steinling, guys like Isaiah, Augustus. Talk a little bit about that.
So, on average, over the past like 25 years, we've seen like a decline in the average testosterone level of the American man, which is a tragedy, truly a tragedy. There is this sentiment. I don't know how we all found each other through Twitter, right? But like we all found each other through Twitter. However, there's a shared sentiment that's growing increasingly over time that you can just do things. Like the world is our oyster. You can just decide to build great things, and the world will open up itself to you. This was not ordinarily this is not a new concept, right? This has been a shared concept by what you could describe as like the adventure class. A class of individuals who self-selected just decided that I can set out into the world and I can affect change. I can literally just do things, right? There's this there's a sentiment that I share, this thing that I like to do, that Augustus and I, do a ton. Many of the other fellows, but it's sort of like Augustus was like my one of my best friends, like sort of like him and I kind of like were one of the originals at like kind of the doing this thing we call serendipity maxing, right? You can just say yes to things and go on this crazy adventure quest. Augustus and I went on this thing we called the Great Based American Tour when we initially started our companies. Again, slept on a lot of floors, slept on a lot of couches. Went from city to city. I was talking to factory owners. Augustus was talking to farm owners, and we were adventuring. And it was great. We just kept getting introduced to more and more new people, and we just kept saying, yes, yeah, I'll go to Texas. I'll go to Idaho. Hell yeah, let's just adventure. Truly, like you can just do things. And there's this inherent sense of, I think, with the onset of like social media becoming so popular in the past 15 plus years. Because you can see everybody else's things that they're doing, you think, oh, like somebody must have already, or this sort of like downplaying of your own agency, because you find yourself as being one person in this sea of millions of people that you can scroll through and everybody's doing things or whatever. And so it has hurt the spirit of individuality and the spirit of adventure for individuals, because you can just Google what does, Petra in Jordan look like. You don't have to go there to see the grandeur of this crazy temple thing carved into a mountain. And I think that ease of access of information has been lost on people. It's caused the loss of adventurism in people. And so I think what I've seen recently, increasingly so, right, like myself included, the fellows included, is this notion that you can just go on adventures. You can just travel around and meet crazy people and do crazy things. And if you have good in your soul and intention to make the world better, other people will see that and they will help you on your journey. And it is one of the scariest things for like somebody who doesn't know that to think like, oh, I can't just go to this random place. I inherently think that people are evil and bad, and it's like super cringe. People are just a lot of people, majority of people, unfortunately, are inherently pessimistic about the nature of humanity. I am a definite optimist. I think that humanity is great. I think humanity is capable of greatness. I believe in heroism. I believe in looking up to someone. I think that is lost on people. I think nowadays, like, huge Elon fan. Like my whole life since I was like 12. Before he became like such a crazy big name, I like created my Twitter account in like 2013 or 2014 when I was like 12 or 13. Created my Twitter account to tweet at Elon, like, hey, like I'm in 8th grade, but I'm going to go to MIT and be an aerospace engineer. Can you hold SpaceX back a bit? Like I want to go to Mars. Hope you guys get to Mars. Back then, right? I like look up to that guy. That guy is a hero of mine, and you need to have heroes. You need to believe that you need to have romanticism in your heart. You need to believe in heroism. You need to believe that humanity is capable of great things in order to see that you yourself are also capable of great things. Like, if you're generally like an Elon hater, if you're a hater of greatness, you have poisoned your own soul, and you yourself do not believe that you are capable of greatness. And I believe that every human, every person is capable of greatness. You just have to find that greatness inside you. I think the venture of building a company is the modern equivalent of setting out on your own adventure and being the captain of a ship, right? There's this great poem called Invictus, huge fan of. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. This is a statement and a sentiment that is not rung true for many, many people. People feel, generally speaking, like they are, like a slave to something, that something is bogs them down. And I think this also ties very deeply to the lack of religion in modern life. I heard this, I think I saw like this deep fried meme, like when I was like 11, and it really just like, it stuck with me ever since. It's even the godless end up worshiping something. And it's true. Again, post 1991, definitely like post 2008, like just massive rise in atheism, drop in belief in religion. The notion of Christianity, like this notion that there is this, like Christ is something to aspire to. Like he is the ultimate role model, right? He is somebody that you should live up to. You always generally fall short, and that's okay, but like you should strive to be. And it's that lack of striving towards like a personification of yourself as greatness that is lacking upon people. So people who are not inclined towards the belief in heroism, towards romanticism, that is at an all-time low. And so I think the counter-positioning to this is the modern founder class, this modern group of people who said, nope, I'm just going to be positive. I'm just going to be optimistic. I think the world is worth saving, and I think that I can do something about it. And I think people are now getting more and more sick of the notion that you can't do anything about it. The world is bad, and we should just submit. And I am incredibly proud to see that there are more and more people of this notion, of the sentiment that, like, you can just do things. You can just go out and make the world fucking better. And that's important. And so there's this sort of like, the same way that Josh Steinman, helped me get my start, helped Augustus, and like really believed in us and like introduced us to people and was, an early like mentor and friend, like there's this pay it forward notion of like, if you see somebody who has high agency, high autonomy, wants to make the world better, like you owe it to yourself and the world and to the people who bet on you to bet on this person. And it's this tendency away from risk aversion, right? When you bet on someone, like you're wagering social capital. Now you have to have a good gut feeling for is an individual capable of greatness? Do they see that in themselves? And usually it's very like self-reinforcing. Like the thing that you index on when you are like making a bet on a person is not like, are they extraordinarily skilled? Are they super duper smart? It's, will they figure it out? Will they be great? Do they want to be great? And those suppose basically, greatness supposes that you desire to be great. Greatness does not come through, you do not accidentally become great. You become great because you decided to. It takes agency, it takes autonomy, it takes suffering. Suffering is an essential part of this. I think a lack of a willingness to suffer is also, over the past 20, 30 years, what we've seen as well. I think that is a key characteristic of this sort of new adventure class, this founder class of I will put myself in a really painful position because it matters. Because why not? Because what else is there? Because truly this is the greatest adventure I can spend my life going on. And it's way better than the alternative.
100%.
Yeah.
What's the starter pack you would give to someone? Let's assume someone is high agency, but they've just gotten off into some back channel. They got their degree, but they know that they should be doing something better, and they feel like they can't.
They're stuck in the Salesforce tower, right?
They're stuck in the Salesforce tower. They didn't run into a Steinman. They didn't run into any of the fellas. What should they do? What's the starter pack for them?
A canister pre-workout and a Twitter account. Truly, you need to be high energy. You need to just go get after it, and you have to be willing to make yourself look like an idiot. My job is not just to go make things happen, it's to build the armada, to build the alliance. It's to get more people involved, to become friends with more people, to expand the sort of the banner, right? We all fly a banner, right? And it would be the job of that person to find more like-minded people, because you will not get there alone. I don't know if you guys this is sort of like a funny divergence, but if you guys ever anime at all in general, anything?
Miyazaki,
Yeah, Naruto at all?
No.
Very popular show, book. I'm not like a...
I know Naruto, yes.
Yeah.
Never.
So it's the sentiment that, like, as a founder, it is your job to be Naruto and not Sasuke. Naruto is this sort of like goofy kid who's just kind of like, you know, putzing through the world. He's like not super skilled, but like, God damn it, that guy does not give up. And there's something about him that everybody just wants to bet on. They're like, he's a goofy kid, but like, man, he's just working his goddamn heart out. And because of that, because he just pours his heart into what matters, and he loves his friends, he cares about his community, and he bears suffering to make the world better, people want to bet on him. Sasuke, on the other hand, power hungry, power chasing, genius, but only cares about himself, only cares about becoming powerful internally. And it's that, like, that is who you do not want to be. That is like the quintessential example that, like, I at least view as like the hero's story, the hero's journey, but like more so like the modern founder adventure perspective. Like, you have to be Naruto, you cannot be Sasuke. You, like, this is why, like, I'm just a silly goofy guy, right? Like, I'm just a guy trying to save the West, trying to make sure that American manufacturing doesn't collapse. And I think it's your job as a founder to do that as well. To, like, be lighthearted, to be very serious with a capital S, serious about your mission and your place in the world, but not serious with lowercase s, where you're, like, you know, very, like, serious and you're, you know, and take yourself very seriously. Right. And, you know, so my advice, my starter pack for that person would be, go find more people, build your armada. Like, you say, you know, who somebody who, like, didn't run into a Steinman, like, go find that guy. Go find those guys. Reach out to them. Like, take some pre-workout, get on Twitter. Start ripping bangers. Like, read a fuck ton. Understand what matters. Read philosophy. Read about production. Read about history. Like, just become extremely well-read and knowledgeable. Formulate opinions. Formulate serious opinions that are not just like the slop of some, like, random Twitter account you follow. Formulate opinions, be high energy, and go find like-minded people who care about the same shit you do in the same way that you care about it. And naturally, you end up building this sort of vortex of interesting opportunity. And then always say yes to that opportunity. Never say no. Say yes, and then figure it out. That's the notion of serendipity, Max. These are two things that go hand in hand. You say yes, you figure it out. You say yes, you figure it out. Eventually, things just start happening. Like, if you knuckle down and you figure out everything that comes at you, you will win. And when you're not, when you end up being this vortex of interesting opportunity and interesting things that happen, it begets more interesting things. It's sort of like it's very much like a fusion reaction in the sun. You end up, like, you know, inducing other fusion reactions by proxy, and you end up basically catalyzing a bunch of different reactions. And so it's very much that, in that, like, you have this, like, positively reinforcing feedback loop after you sort of, like, you know, come over this threshold. And so, like, that is how you go from being nobody to, or, like, you know, being a 2-follower Twitter account that, like, you know, you're like, why, you know, you're tweeting, you get 1 like, and you're screaming into the void, and, you know, you have to find other people. You have to build community. Like myself, Augustus, Isaiah, Teddy, like, you know, Cam Schiller, Cody James, like, there's more. Like, we found each other. We built this community, and it didn't happen like, you know, could we all be doing what we're doing individually with, you know, no one else not having met each other? Maybe, but probably not. There's strength in numbers, there's power in community, and that is one of the most important things you can do early, is in sort of your hero's journey, is build the armada, build the clan, build the tribe. I think it's incredibly important. I've benefited, like, my life has gotten infinitely better now that I'm surrounded by friends who help, you know, want to save the West with me.
Dude, extremely based. Extremely based. What's next for Dirac? What do you guys have cooking?
Funny enough, you guys came on a very good day. Tomorrow we are announcing, so by the time this goes live, this will already be out, but tomorrow we are announcing Build OS V1, the enterprise-grade, ITAR-compliant version of our platform. And so there are a couple things that we care a lot about, right? We care about radically improving quality of life for the guy doing the work on the shop floor. And we care about making their lives not only better, but safer. We care about making their lives significantly more straightforward in the work that they're trying to do. We want to make their lives less boring. And so there are, for us, a bunch of features, quality of life improvements that we've baked in after working with folks for the past year or so since the original sort of alpha legacy version came out, that we've baked in. We basically rebuilt the software from the ground up. Entirely new application, built from the ground up, way faster, dynamic resimulation, much better UI UX, simulation's more accurate, and we're now, we got some other announcements coming up in the future about integrations and partnerships and customers and stuff, but I would say the most exciting thing about the new app is this thing works, and it works at scale. It works really well for big customers, for big CAD files, and it's pretty exciting for us to start seeing live. So it's been technically out for the past month or two. So we've onboarded a bunch of really exciting enterprises, mid-market manufacturers, and we've seen that hell, our software works well for people. We're live on shop floors. We did a really cool case study with this company called Ankara. Ankara's a tier 1 supplier to aerospace companies like Boeing, Airbus, etc. They're responsible for a variety of different cargo loading mechanisms. They make for the cargo loading mechanism for the A330, the A350, all these really complex, really cool systems for Airbus. And so the sentiment that we've seen and heard from folks is that the new application is way better than the old one, and this is something that radically changes quality of life for their guys on the shop floor, both from the manufacturing engineers making the work instructions. We saw 95% reduction in time to make a work instruction, something that took folks weeks, they were able to do in a couple hours. So that's been really huge. And then generally speaking, now we can actually start going after big companies. And that's been pretty exciting for us. So that's kind of what's up next. So that's tomorrow's Wednesday. On Thursday, we're doing a new office warming party thing. This week is I guess New York Deep Tech Week, which is I think somewhat of a silly notion, but fine. Let's do another tech week, right? Let's all gather. Frankly, I'm glad because it brings cool people into town. It's great to see you guys. We just moved into a new office about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, I would say. We are now, as you can see, in the Empire State Building. What better place to help rebuild the American empire than from its Capitol building in its capital city? And so we are doing sort of this office warming party on Thursday. Should be fun.
Case in point, if you can just do things.
You can literally just do
man is sitting in the Empire State Building.
truly, you can just get an office in the Empire State Building. It was very difficult. It is. I don't think there's any startups in this building except us, and I think LinkedIn has 7 floors, and that's it. Yeah, it's a bunch of. This is not in. It was not an easy endeavor. Okay. I'll tell you guys.
So you intentionally hustled your way into.
Oh,
you're talking to Phil Harris.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I will tell you. So the Empire State Building is owned by a publicly traded corporation called ESRT, the Empire State Realty Trust. Because of that, there's a bunch of different things and requirements and whatnot. And so, as a seed stage startup, we're generally broke. And so, we obviously have capital and whatnot, but it's there are requirements that make it very difficult for a company that is not LinkedIn with 7 floors to be in the building. And through the brute force and strength of my will and might and the great friends that we have now all of a sudden at JPMorgan Chase, we were able to get a office in this building. We ended up having to do, it's crazy. So we have a 3-year lease for the office, and which is normal standard 3-year lease. By the way, cheaper price per square foot in here than those buildings behind me. Mm-hmm. So if you look at New York real estate, we had our first office here was $35-$40 a square foot a year, which is for this, that's like dirt cheap for this area. That's like everything that's like around that price is usually like really, really not great. Like our office was right across the street from like a methadone clinic, and so we just had we called them the committee. They were just the folks who were sort of like slumped over in front of our door, like in packs. They were like usually like 4 to 5 of them at a time, so very unpleasant. But it's like that's sort of like what you end up getting for like $35-$40 a square foot a year. Those buildings, brand new Hudson Yards, like super duper fancy, whatever. That's like $120, $125 a square foot a year. So like 4 times more expensive. This spot, cheaper. I mean, it's the Empire State Building. You think like, holy shit, it's got to be crazy. It's like we're paying $68 a square foot a year. So like, relatively like, like not bad at all. Relative to like, the crazy stuff here. And honestly, I would much rather be here than anywhere else because like, for the value of what this place is, there is not only like iconic value, but sentimental value. Like this is a building that's a testament to the greatness of what American like might and will can do. This building was built in a little over a year. Many, many things not built in a year, a little bit over a year. And so part of why we chose to move to the Empire State Building was we wanted to remind ourselves every day when we walked in, this is what humanity and this is what human greatness is capable of. And so, sentimentally, that is like why we're here. Also, like, I mean, it's pretty sweet. No. We get to keep an eye on New Jersey, make sure they don't invade. So you got to be careful with those guys, the New Jerseyans. I'm a native New Yorker, so there's always like the obligatory. My co-founder and I are both like originally from like the South Shore of Long Island. It's small town called Oceanside. So it's not like the typical like Long Island that you hear and you're like, oh, like fancy Long Island. Like, no, we're from like normal, like middle class Long Island, which is like, everybody in our hometown, like half the guys I grew up with are like plumbers or electricians. So it's like very much, I got out, but, I grew up like coming to the city. And so like we were actually originally like in an office right by Penn Station, like a block away from like Moynihan. So you could actually see MSG out the window, which really sick view, but the location wasn't really the best. Penn Station area is like not super great nowadays, but it is I don't know.
It's incredible. It puts you in a different state of mind when you walk in the door and when you see the architecture and all the details and like the more like all the materials that make the building it puts you in a different place.
100%. It's Art Deco, very Art Deco filled. I don't know if we wanted to like point the cameras and show like the rest of the office.
Yeah. You want to do a little tour?
Here. I won't do a full tour, but like we're actually, every conference room in the office is named after a American industrialist. So this is the Knudsen room. That's actually a floor map of the assembly process of the B-29 bomber. That is the actual, so that's Bill Knudsen on the left, the plan on the right. So that's the man, the plan, and the action on the top. Yeah, and then the other room we have behind the fellows over there is that is the Kaiser room. So also has like Henry Kaiser, shows various shows his like shipyards and whatnot. So yeah,
a legend. Dude, these guys. I mean, that's the other thing you read about these guys, and they moved so fast. They could do so much so quick. They're like building a year. Shipyards stood up.
Yep.
Hoover Dam, done. What else do you want?
Men capable of great actions.
And today we're like, man, I don't know if we can. I don't know if I can turn on Shopify.
It's like, dude, that's tough. Shopify, stores are tough, man. I've never even tried, but it's I don't know. We come in here, we think about like the part of the reason why all the offices are named after industrialists, aside from like the book Freedom's Forge, if you ever read it, highly recommend it. Like it is one of our core like founding like tenets and books. We find that like having like a boardroom named after Bill Knudsen allows us to think a little bit more or feel a little bit more serious about the endeavor that we're embarking upon. Like, yes, we're a software company for now. In general, if you aspire to and look up to great men like Bill Knudsen, like Henry Kaiser, you yourself realize that, like, yeah, you are capable of greatness. Like, and it's not just me. Everybody in our company does too. And we all know we're working on a serious problem. We all know what we're working on is valuable. What we're working on means a lot to the people that we build for. And we get up every day realizing that like we wouldn't really rather be doing anything else. So
this is awesome. Hey, if people want to learn more about Dirac, whether it's customers or potential people to join, where should they go?
So either check out my Twitter. I'll give you the website link. Our website is diracinc.com. So DIRAC.
Right there on the jacket.
Dirac, like the physicist, Dirac, inc.com. So diracinc.com. And then my Twitter handle is FILARONS, like Phil Aarons. Had to, abbreviate it. Well, long last name. Yeah.
Great stuff, man. Great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the New Founding Podcast. New Founding has become a rallying point for founders and investors who are taking serious bets in the face of a stagnant business culture. Our venture fund backs founders building dynamic companies, powered by American ideals and a positive national vision. These are the kinds of founders that embody the optimism and competence of the people who come on this podcast. If you're interested in investing in our fund, check out newfounding.com/venture fund and follow the link to apply.